Hello, fans, collectors, investors. Welcome back to Iconic Baseball. I'm Iconic Al, and we are marching right along on this countdown at number 43 today. Now, this is quite simply, by the numbers, the greatest second baseman of the post-war era. In fact, on my list, he slots in as my fifth highest ranked second baseman, just behind Rogers Hornsby, Jackie Robinson, Eddie Collins, and Napoleon Lajoie. So that's the group that this guy is in here. He amassed 100.4 WAR during his career, a career in which he won 2 MVP awards, 2 World Series titles, 5 Gold Glove awards. This guy is the definition of a complete player. He is synonymous with those Big Red Machine teams of the 70s. And you could say that he might have been the engine of the Big Red Machine. This man needs no introduction. I am, of course, talking about the great Joe Morgan.
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and cracker jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
You know, I was thinking in the last few days of, what I was going to say today. I've got a lot of things written down, but as I approach today, I start to realize that, I was very lucky to be able to play Major League Baseball. When I grew up in Oakland, a lot of great players came out of Oakland. Frank Robinson, Theda Pinson, Willie Stargell. But they had one thing in common. They were about 6 feet. Real physical specimen. So you see, I was very lucky for a guy to be 5'5", weigh 140 pounds, and for the scouts, Bill White, to see that maybe I had the potential to be a major league player. I remember Billy Goodman one day, he told me, he said, "Joe, you have to approach every season like you're a rookie." He said, if you had a great season, you have to prove that it was not a fluke. If you had a lousy year, you have to prove that it was a fluke. So for 20 years, that's the way I approached spring training. And I think that's one of the things that really helped me. I remember my first at-bat like it was yesterday. My first at-bat was the bottom of the 9th inning against the Philadelphia Phillies. And the Phillies were fighting for the National League pennant. There was a winning run, was on second base, and I got a base hit. And the winning run scored. And Gene Mauch, who was the manager of the Phillies, was so mad that when he went in the clubhouse, he yelled at his players and told them, "You guys got beat by a guy that looks like a little leaguer." Well, he was right. But because of the Nellie Foxes and the Eddie Cascos and the guys who did a lot to help me to become a big leaguer, now I'm a part of the biggest league of all, and that's what's important to me.
Okay, let's give Joe Morgan a little respect here. This man compiled the 4th highest WAR total among all second basemen, all time. The only 3 second basemen in baseball history that have a higher WAR than Joe Morgan are Rogers Hornsby, Eddie Collins, and Napoleon Lajoie. It seems like as the advanced analytics have become more available and more popular, people are finally starting to catch on to Joe Morgan as an elite tier second baseman. I think prior to that, the reason maybe he wasn't on people's radar as much is because he didn't hit the classic milestones, 3,000 hits, 400 home runs, or 500 home runs. He didn't, get into those exclusive elite clubs. Yet, as we look deeper at his OPS of 819, or his OPS plus of 132, or his on-base percentage, which was 392, we realize that this was truly an elite player over his career. If all you do is look at his batting average of 271, okay, that doesn't really flag as anything elite. But the 392 on-base percentage really gives you a different picture of Joe Morgan as a player. He was walking 100 times a season, which completely changes the calculus with a guy like that. He hit 268 home runs, which is great. But when you couple that with his 689 stolen bases, a guy who averaged 42 steals a season. That, again, paints a whole different picture of a guy who was producing, who was gaining total bases, he was scoring runs, he was getting on base, which is what explains that gigantic WAR total. And when you put it all together, you can make a compelling argument that he was the best player in baseball for about a 5-year span. If you go down the list from 1972 to about 1976, his WAR totals are striking. Starting in 1972, he had 9.3 WAR. 1973, 9.3 WAR again. 1974, 8.6 WAR. 1975, 11 WAR. 1976, 9.6 WAR. In 4 out of 5 of those seasons, he had the highest WAR in the league. So you're talking, this guy had such an impact on the game, both at the plate, on the base paths, and defensively, that he was contributing wins to his team at a rate that really nobody else in baseball was at that time. He won 5 Gold Glove awards, in addition to being so productive at the plate and on the base paths. This was a guy who was raised to be a ball player. And by ball player, that means you do it all. He was not a one-dimensional player. And so to look at his stats only as numbers, totals, tally marks, saying, okay, how many hits did he tally? How many home runs did he tally? What was his batting average? Which are the traditional metrics that people look at. That doesn't give you enough of a picture of how great Joe Morgan was. So now I really believe he is getting the respect he deserves, starting to, anyway. I don't think his values have quite caught up yet to his greatness, but I believe that is coming. And in my opinion, there's no better time to get into some Joe Morgan items than right now. Speaking of Joe Morgan items, let's take a look at what I have in my collection. The first being a signed card from 1968 Topps. This is a pretty rough condition, well-loved card with some rounded corners. It's definitely seen some action. But I love it. I love its eye appeal from arm's length more than anything. And the autograph is really what makes it special. Just a beautifully placed, bold autograph. The autograph I had graded and authenticated. It's a mint 9 autograph. The card would probably grade about a 1, especially because there's some pen marking on the back. But again, for me, it's about the arm's length eye appeal for this card, and how the portrait really displays well. This was before he got dealt to the Reds, and would go on to win 2 World Series championships with the Cincinnati Reds, part of that iconic Big Red Machine team. And last but certainly not least, the 1965 Topps Joe Morgan rookie card, I think, is one of the more undervalued cards in the hobby, because, as I said, he's in that elite tier of second baseman. And this is a card in a PSA 5, which, by the way, this is a very striking example with great centering, great eye appeal. And a card like this in a PSA 5 can still be owned for $100, which is amazing. I mean, if you look at what that could get you in the modern card market, looking at prospects or high-end packs, $100 doesn't get you a lot these days. But it can still get you a Joe Morgan rookie card, a PSA 5. I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer. So I own it. And I love it. Just a beautiful early shot of Joe Morgan on the Colt 45s. So one of my favorite vintage rookie cards. And I think one of the greatest bargains in the hobby. All right. Well, as always, thank you for joining me on the countdown. And until next time, keep collecting and stay iconic.